afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Leadership Development, How to Use Coach, Co-Achieving. My name is Allison Johns, and I'm the Director of Culture and Leadership here at Human Synergistics, and I'll also serve as your facilitator for today's session where we will be highlighting our leadership simulation, Coach. And I will say this is one of my favorite exercises, so I hope you all develop more interest and intrigue as we go through today's session. I will present for approximately 30 minutes today, and then we'll have additional time at the end for any remaining questions that aren't answered throughout the session. I'd also like to let you know that all phones and microphones will be muted during the webinar, so please send through any questions that you do have during the session, either using the chat or questions feature that are located in the GoToWebinar panel. So let's go ahead and get started. So Coach, or as it's described, Co-Achieving, was developed by Michael Gorley of our Human Synergistics New Zealand location. It was based on over 40 years of research on achievement motivation, and throughout that research, many interviews were conducted with athletes and coaches. So it's also based on extensive review of literature and on managing teams in both sports and business contexts. So the research has also been done through Human Synergistics and others on leaders and team motivation. And we've done quite a bit of field testing of the exercise with successful executives and coaches. So this is a unique exercise that's designed to help participants, and more specifically leaders and managers, explore their assumptions about motivation and achievement with respect to both individuals and groups, which we'll get into a bit more as we detail the exercise itself. The exercise is based in, or I should say is set in more of a sporting context, but the sports allows the participants to question their assumptions in a non-threatening way. But that knowledge and skills that they gain during the experience are essential to successfully managing people in all kinds of organizations, regardless of the setting. So it's not just based for sports teams, it's based across all industries in various settings. And the other big difference compared to some of our other simulations, if any of you are familiar with our survival simulations or our business or challenge series simulations, is that it's designed more to assess the participants' values and beliefs rather than the primary focus being around their abilities to achieve synergy or make effective group decisions. So the exercise itself, the overarching goal is to help develop a more comprehensive understanding of how to constructively motivate individuals and teams. And the challenge is set up in the sense that the individuals are being asked that the actual situation is that they are a successful coach of a team sport with a track record of coaching teams that perform well. And they've been asked to take on a team that has not been performing so well to help increase the performance of this team. So they've accepted the invitation to coach the team for the rest of the season, and having accepted that challenge, they need to make some decisions around the coaching methods that will be used. So what they do is complete two different booklets, one around the approach, goals, and selection, and the second around the training and team talks. So they go through first as an individual, and then they come to a group consensus. So what they do is they go through each of the booklets and select, as I mentioned first, individually, what approaches they'll take. So they aren't necessarily going through and doing a ranking of what they'll use. It's more of a selection around what particular approaches or how they'll structure the goals, selection, etc. So for example, in the approach section, they will select if they want to take the approach that they demand players are loyal to you as a coach and see they obey your instructions. So if that's an approach you would want to take, then you would select that as an individual. So after they've completed as a group. So setting up group sizes anywhere from 3 to 8 is ideal. And you can have one team go through it, or you can have multiple teams complete the exercise in one session. But they want to come through to a group consensus. So they're not doing voting. They're truly coming to a consensus around the approaches that they would take to help this team perform well. Oh, I see a question has come through. And everyone is not seeing the slides. So let me go back and show you. Here was around the co-achieving, around the background of setting up the tools. And then here's an overview of the exercise that I was just describing. So hopefully everyone can see them now. And great. All right. It helps if you show your screen, right? So beauty of technology. And I'll also share this presentation with everyone. I'm sure that question will come through too. So in advance, I want to let you know that I will share the presentation with everyone who's participating today. So you'll have access to the slides. All right, so now we've given an overview of the exercise and the structure of COACH. So I want to touch base now on the Circumflex, because the Circumflex is a huge part of the COACH exercise, and of course the majority of our assessments at Human Synergistics. So you can see the Circumflex, it's divided into 3 clusters: the constructive styles, the passive defensive styles, and the aggressive defensive styles. So those are the 3 clusters. And within each of those clusters, there are 4 styles that make up the cluster. I also want to highlight that when you look at the Circumflex, if you divide it in half vertically, those styles on the right-hand side have more of a people orientation, while those styles on the left-hand side have more of a task orientation. And when you split it in half horizontally, those styles towards the bottom represent the need to fulfill more of our lower order security needs. And then as we move towards the top of the Circumflex, there's an emphasis around meeting our higher order satisfaction needs. So if we start first to give a high-level overview of the clusters and styles, if we start in the constructive, those are our blue styles at the top of the Circumflex, and they reflect more of a balanced concern for completing the task and motivating team members. So managers and coaches with these styles behave in ways that encourage others to behave in ways that satisfy their higher order needs for personal satisfaction, achievement, and affiliation. So as a result of the constructive styles, individuals and groups are more effective that use these styles than individuals and groups that are relatively weak along these styles. So to get more into the details around the styles that make up the constructive, if we start with the achievement, this is a focus around accomplishing tasks, enjoyment of challenges, and the ability to set difficult but attainable goals. And managers and coaches with this style believe that outcomes depend on an effort rather than luck or chance. And learning from their mistakes, explore alternatives before acting. And really the focus around the achievement style is the development of expectations or goals and standards for their team. The self-actualizing style, style number 12, this is characterized by an optimistic and energetic approach that promotes more self-confidence in oneself as well as others. So managers and coaches with this style demonstrate a strong desire to learn and experience different things. They're more creative, yet realistic in their thinking, and demonstrate a balance for that task and people that we were talking about before. So if we think in terms of development, the focus around this particular style is really the development of self. When we move more towards the people side with the humanistic encouraging, there's a concern more for the growth and development of other people. So managers and coaches with this style have a strong positive regard for others, and they direct their energy toward encouraging and providing support to their employees, team members, as well as their coworkers. So here the focus is really around the development of others. And the last of the constructive styles is the affiliative style, and that's more of a focus around building friendly, cooperative relationships with other people. And these managers and coaches develop mutually meaningful relationships. So they're more open, direct in their communication and feedback, and thoughtful in expressing their feelings. So this one is really a focus around the development of relationships. So if we think about coach, we've got co, which is the focus around cooperation, and then achievement. So you can get more now where those constructive styles lead to the effectiveness of coach. So it's a little bit backwards on the Circumflex, but the real focus is around that cooperation and achievement with the emphasis around the constructive styles. If we go through now the defensive styles, starting with the passive defensive, these reflect more of a predominant interest in maintaining one's security with other people that comes at the expense of completing the task. So if you remember, these are more on the people side and fulfilling the lower order security needs. So managers and coaches who are using more of the passive defensive styles are a bit more apprehensive or insecure, may lack initiative or direction. And units and teams that are led by passive defensive managers or coaches often stagnate as the desire to maintain superficially pleasant relationships takes more precedent over getting the job done. So more of that focus of going along, playing it safe. So if we touch base real quickly on these four styles, if we start with the approval, now this is more of a preoccupation with the opinions of others, so the need to be accepted by others. And managers and coaches with this style, they have that need to be accepted and place more in an emphasis on being agreeable and liked by the team members, rather than the focus on having more healthy relationships and the focus around collaboration that was more in the affiliative style. Conventional, there's a tendency to conform, be more predictable. So managers and coaches with this style, they rely on procedures or established routines. They're much more predictable and reluctant to try new or different ways of doing things because the way we've always done it is preferred. So not as open to change with the conventional style. Dependent is the need to rely on the guidance and direction of others. So coaches with this style allow others to make decisions for them. So they're not taking the initiative, they're depending on others for help and exert little control. The last of the passive defensive styles is the avoidance, which is around just playing it safe. So we may be avoiding people or the task or possibly both, withdrawing from difficult decisions and really avoiding risk. So these managers and coaches, they tend to be more indecisive, they procrastinate more, and will often shift responsibilities to others. The last cluster, or the red styles, is the aggressive defensive. And these reflect an overemphasis on demonstrating one's superiority at the task and an underemphasis on paying attention to the needs of other people. So now we're on that task side rather than the people. So these managers and coaches, it's more of a focus around the short-term results, but they often reflect stronger stress, conflict, and they'll put their needs above the team's needs. So if we start with oppositional, pointing out flaws when they're using the oppositional style, and placing blame on other people to cover what could possibly be their own mistakes. Power emphasizes a strong need for control and a lack of confidence in other people. These managers often seek to control and dictate rather than guide, so doing much more telling rather than listening. And they they try to run everything themselves and act in a more forceful way. Competitive is around the need to impress others and the focus around winning at all costs. These managers and coaches are constantly comparing their unit or team members to others and forcing the teams to prove themselves against each other. So promoting much more internal competition rather than external competition. And the last style is the perfectionistic style number 10. And this is the need to set and achieve unrealistically high standards of performance. So really striving for perfection. And these managers and coaches are preoccupied with attaining flawless results. They tend to place excessive demands on themselves as well as their team members and assume that they have to have all of the answers. So you can see that the aggressive defensive styles, they've got that task focus and are putting much more pressure on the team to achieve results, while the passive defensive have more of that emphasis on people and the need to go along and conform with others, rather than the constructive where we were emphasizing that cooperation and achievement, having that balance of both accomplishing the task, but also being sure to maintain those relationships and the development of others, right? So here's the beauty now of the coach exercise. Now that you have a better understanding of the circumflex, it really helps you, the exercise helps to gain awareness and appreciation of the attitudes and thinking patterns that underlie a cooperative, achievement-oriented management approach. So each of the items that the participants are responding to are associated with a style on the circumflex. So they can be a constructive, passive defensive, or aggressive defensive. And it helps to illustrate the difference, especially between the constructive and defensive approaches. So they're able to identify their own individual score and see how they achieved as a group when they came to consensus on the items. So within the leader's guide, there's a detailed rationale behind each of the items, and it ties back to the research that was done. So you can really have an in-depth discussion around each of the items and look at where we scored well, where we may not have scored as well, and recognizing the difference between the styles on individual and team motivation. So having gone through this myself and being familiar with the circumflex, you would think I would have gone straight for those constructive approaches, but it really makes you think. So one example is around the goal setting. So it's looking at what approaches you would use in terms of setting goals for the 12 games that are left within the season. So, you know, should we win all 12 games, win 6 games, which is a 75% chance of success, take each game as it comes, win 9 games, which would be a 50% chance of success, or win 3 games. And that's just avoiding being at the bottom and losing your sponsorship. So it was interesting when we were debriefing this that, you know, win all 12 games. Well, that's actually associated with the perfectionistic style because we have to achieve all 12 games, which is unrealistic and putting high pressure on the team. So it's a fascinating discussion when you're going through and doing the scoring and the rationale, because you think, well, that's actually a great approach. And then when you see, oh my gosh, it's actually driving more defensive behaviors. So that's why I love to connect back to the circumflex, and it really gets them thinking more about, oh, maybe I'm not having the intent that I wanted to by taking some of these approaches. Because even though it's in the sports context, you can still tie it back to your business results that you may have been approaching. So when thinking when to use this exercise, of course, it's a great way to introduce new leaders to the ideas of cooperation and achievement. And it's also a nice way to promote leadership development. So you can use this as an introductory tool or more as a check-in or reinforcer when the team is really focused more on leadership development. And I'll get into this a bit more shortly about how you can incorporate it with some of our other assessments around development. It's also interesting to connect it back to change, especially around cultural change, to see how those leaders may be reinforcing the efforts that the organization is making in terms of shifting their culture. So these are just a few examples of when you can use it. And when we're looking at introducing leaders to it, it's more of that personal level connection that they have for those new leaders to start thinking about the approaches they may take, where if it's a leader that's been in their role for a while, or they've been in management or leadership, they can immediately start to apply their learnings to their current day-to-day work activities. So just before we get into some of the other complementary tools, I want to mention that when you're doing this exercise just on its own, it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. If you have a larger group, you may want to block more time, but if you have a smaller team, you may be able to get it done more around 2 hours. But you want to give yourself enough time to really debrief the items and have some in-depth discussion around the different approaches and the difference between the constructive and the defensive styles. Other features too around the participants booklet is that the individuals get an action plan that they can start to work on after going through the coach activity to think about their different leadership styles around the constructive, aggressive defensive, and passive defensive, and start making some specific goals about what they want to do to move more towards the constructive styles. And then they also get a participant booklet that gives some more details around achievement orientation and more quotes from leading coaches that are out there and more of the values and behaviors. So it's a great resource for them to have aside from the activity. Are there any questions before we move into how you can use this with other tools that are available? I don't see any that have come in, so if you do have a question, be sure to send it through to the questions or the chat feature. I'll just give a second in case anyone wants to send one through. And we'll keep going on, so if questions do come up, please send them through, and we'll of course have more time at the end to discuss these as well. So now I wanted to share some of the complementary tools that go well with Coach for those of you who are aware of them, or to give you some more guidance around our other offerings that pair well around leadership development. The first I want to highlight is Coach with our Lifestyles Inventory Assessment. So the Lifestyles Inventory is looking at personal styles. So it uses the same Circumflex that we reviewed earlier, but now it's looking at the thinking and behavioral tendencies of individuals. So we can see if they have more constructive, passive defensive, or aggressive thinking in terms of their self-assessment and how that behavior is perceived by others with a description by others. So they can either do their self-assessment or they can do the two together so that they can see if they have awareness or if there may be some blind spots or stumbling blocks for them that they need to shift in their thinking and behavior. So a few different ways that you can approach this. You can do it with in conjunction with a leadership development program where they've gone through the LSI self-assessment and description by others, and you could do it more as part of a check-in. So they've gone through the assessment, they've gotten a debrief of their results, and they've worked on their action plan. So possibly at a 6-month check-in, the group could go through the coach and relate it back to what they've been focused on and shifting their thinking and behavior and see how that plays out in the coach exercise. Another approach, which you see over here with our group development session, this is one of our standard offerings, is that you can pair it in a one-day session, and you actually have the participants go through the coach exercise and then also complete their LSI-1 self-description using one of our hand-scored forms, or they could do it online in advance. But the focus is really around their own thinking. So they'd go through the coach exercise, complete the LSI, and then score the coach to see how well they performed and score their LSI results. And then they can debrief coach and the LSI together. So in that moment, they can see how their thinking is coming out as well as how they performed in the coach exercise. So this is one approach. Another is if we pair it with our impact tools. So we have our leadership impact and management impact, and this ties more to how to reinforce a leadership development program. So both the leadership impact and management impacts, they're measuring the impact that leaders or managers have on the behavior of those around them. So with the leadership impact, it's looking at, are they using prescriptive or restrictive strategies in order to drive behaviors in those around them, whether it be their peers, direct reports, or their higher level manager, which leads to their overall effectiveness. And with the management impact, this is more for your day-to-day managers, more of your mid-level managers, where the leadership impact is more for the senior members, the executives who are setting the vision for the organization, and the management is for those who are executing the vision. Now it's looking at the approaches that they use. Are they using more facilitating or inhibiting approaches in order to drive behaviors in those around them that leads to their overall effectiveness? So by using coach along with either the leadership impact or management impact, it can help participants understand why they may not be having the kind of impact that they desire. So you can once again use it as a check-in to see how they've been working on their impact results or introducing it at the beginning of the impact process as a team is going through. The other I did want to mention is that we have a new leadership team solution that we'll be releasing soon, which is for an intact leadership team, more of a senior leadership team, and looking at their overall effectiveness and the impact that they're having on others. So really setting the purpose, doing some observation. They would each go through the leadership impact, but then working on creating a team development plan so they can create a more constructive impact on each other, which will also affect the impact that they're having on their own teams. So they'll work through their own individual development plan as well as their team development plan and have ongoing coaching. But then this would be an opportunity to put coach in, so coach is part of this process. So as they've worked through their team development plan and doing possibly a 6 or 9 month check-in to see how they're working on their plan, or even earlier, it will help to reinforce the constructive impact that they're looking to have on each other and how that's playing out in the coach exercise. Are we still leaning towards taking some more defensive approaches, or setting more aggressive defensive goals or passive defensive goals and tying it back? So that's another opportunity that coach can be popped in. So we're coming up to our 30 minutes, and I want to pause as we've gone through all of the content for today, and now you've gotten a taste of the coach exercise, how it's set up, as well as how it can be used in your leadership development programs. It can, of course, be used with other tools out there, but there's some great connects with the Circumflex by tying it to the LSI or the impact tools. But are there any questions that are out there in terms of how do I use coach, or when else this could be applied. Give a minute or so for anyone to send through those questions with the chat or the questions box. All right. I'll assume there's no remaining questions. Oh, I did have a question come through. All right. So can you use it with all levels of leaders and managers or even individual contributors? So really this is better to use with leaders or managers at all levels. You can use it with individual contributors, but because of the tie back to applying those skills that you're learning to your day-to-day tasks, I would encourage you to use this more with leaders or managers. Another opportunity could be with some high potentials who you're considering for leadership. It would be a great way to start introducing them to these topics as well. All right. So to wrap up for today, if you do have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. And as I mentioned, I'll be sending a follow-up note with these slides so that you'll have them as a reference, and then you'll also have my contact information if you do not have it. So you can send any questions back to me, or we can have a call to talk through this more. And of course, check out our website as well as our Constructive Culture blog. The other thing I wanted to just mention is we're having our first regional Ultimate Culture Conference. So over the past few years, we've had our annual Ultimate Culture Conference. And now we're taking the approach of connecting with local universities and focusing on building those regional communities. So we'll be having our first one Monday, September 17th, in conjunction with the University of Wisconsin-Madison and their Center for Professional and Executive Development. So be sure to check that out on our website, and hope that some of you can join that as well. So want to thank you all. I just wanted to double check if any other questions have come through. It doesn't look like it, but I thank you all for your engagement and participation in today's session. And like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.